this new company was moving to Denver. They were an IT consulting firm that was doing really well in Minnesota called Born. And they were in IT, and IT is a cool thing. So when they bought the membership and he said they were looking to hire a salesperson, I said, I want in. And they said, well, what do you know about sales? I'm sorry, what do you know about IT consulting? I'm like, nothing. And how long have you been selling? I'm like, I don't know, 10 months. They're like, well, I don't know, maybe let us get the office set up and then we'll talk to you. Because the guy who I sold to was impressed how I sold to him, right? So he was awesome. He was the lead sales guy. And then the branch manager was coming down from Minnesota. It was really just the two of them. And I was like, well, I could do this. And he's like, look, Richard says good things about you, but let's get set up right away. Look, we got to get someone who hit the ground running, blah, 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 right? And I'll never forget, I looked, his name was Mike Sexton. I looked him right in the eye. And I said, Mike, do you have this person in the pipeline yet? He said, no. I said, well, here then, I challenge you to find that person in a hurry. Because if you don't, you would have had me hired, and that would have been another day that I was learning. And there is a curve here where if it takes too long to find them, I would have been up to speed, and now you're losing. You're at net negative. I challenge you to find that person in a hurry. He laughed at me. He said, yeah, okay, I'll remember that. 2 weeks later, he called me up and said, you son of a bitch, I'm still thinking about you saying I challenge you. They hired me. I became one of their top reps. I got promoted to manager and became a partner in the firm within 2.5 years.
Dude, that's a micro secret. So kind of like when you're out there job searching for sales and they throw you that type of objection, you just have to be confident and overcome it. Like how or where did you build that confidence, like with less than a year's sales experience?
It wasn't the confidence necessarily it was a confidence in my knowing that I could sell, right? That was never a challenge. I knew you work your ass off, you can sell. But when I challenged him, it was the confidence in the logic. He felt that it was better to wait and hire someone who understood the space than hire someone who could sell really well now, which I kind of get it. But if he didn't find that person fast enough, he's no longer ahead of the curve. Yep. So it was just simple math, right? So I had no problem challenging anybody with simple math. Like, okay, that makes sense, but you better hurry and find that person, because if you don't, I would have been on all this time learning, growing, selling, and now it didn't work for you. So I challenged the strategy on logic. That's not hard to be confident.
You said one of the biggest learnings or takeaways was you would be out there all over. Yep. So hustle, work your ass off, be out there all over all the time.
There was game and try. Right? Try shit all the time. Try new stuff all the time. And that's why I was going to every training I could get my hands on. Because I was like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I was just trying new approaches. I would say, hey, talked about, okay, well, let me try that instead of this. And actually that I'm skipping ahead here. But my biggest learning lesson, and the one that I could recommend everybody do if they were 22 years old, if I could go back and tell my 22-year-old self, my number one answer to that is A/B split test everything you do.
Data, test everything.
Test everything. Like if you're going after CIOs in the healthcare industry, come up with 2 different messages to CIOs in the healthcare industry. Make 20 phone calls with this approach. Make 20 phone calls with that approach. See what you get with the high response rate.
I used to get in battles with my chief revenue officers about this, and then I was like, dude, let's just use data. Who gives a shit? I don't care if you're right or if I'm right. It doesn't matter.
And say you make 50 dials in a day, right? And you get no meetings.
Yep.
That's a fucking brutal day, right?
It's a long day.
But if you make 50 dials and you make 25 dials with this approach and 25 dials with that approach and you still get no meetings, that's actually not a bad day, because you just figured out 2 approaches that don't work.
Yep.
Eventually you're going to start to figure out stuff that does.
Rule of elimination. Get rid of it. Try a new one. See what works.
Become your own training organization. Read a blog. Try it out. But be conscious about it and track it. Okay?
So the A/B testing. And then the one thing that you said was you gave way more than what you got at all, to grow Thrive Networks. That was a big one.
No, what do you call?
You weren't expecting reciprocation.
Yeah, exactly. No agenda. Not, hey, I'm keeping score here. I gave you a bunch. Now it's my turn.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like that.
I know too many people like that. And there's the fake give, right? Oh no, this is for you, and then you know what's coming afterwards, right? And that's always one. So one of the learning lessons I've learned from an acquisition standpoint is, everybody looks at the finances and those type of things, but very few people, when going through an acquisition, as far as I can tell, look at the sales process and combine and figure out, okay, here's who the ICP is and who they're selling to and what their sales process is, and here's their sales process. Do they fit? One of my biggest learning lessons of my entire career. It's actually now, you can look at it as a closing technique. It's called the doorknob close, which is when you lose a deal, you go back to the client and say, hey, what's the real reason? Be okay with worst case scenario. So any decision you make, think about the worst case scenario. And if you're okay with that, do it.
Got it.
Tactical things. It's end of the year here. You're dealing with non-power. You're not getting anywhere with them. They're not getting, and you got to go talk to the CEO to try to get this thing done. If you are cool with that person blowing the whole thing up and you losing that deal, go to the CEO and say, hey, what's up? As long as you're doing it for the right reason.
And is that the secret? What take the risk? What's the worst case scenario? Or are you thinking we have to regroup? I mean, it's a badass secret.
Yeah, it's I think it's part of it. You know what I mean? It's take calculated risks, but I think the secret is, I think I'll go back to the Xerox example, which is you just give a shit. Because sales is a brutal profession. When you don't believe in what you sell, it's a million times harder, and it's absolutely miserable. When you believe in what you sell, I'm not saying it's easy, but shit, man, it's easier.
I had kind of resisted the sales thing because, I'd done sales already. I don't want to do sales anymore, kind of tired of sales. But when it came down to when I had to make more money, I got married in 2011 and I had to make more money because we had a family. I went back to my core, back to sales, tripled down on outbound prospecting. And that is what enabled me to 10x my own income and support the family. So again, that
was from what? Because I did the same thing. So when you say you share that secret again, what did that?
It's just going back, we call it nailing a niche or a niche.
Yep. Pick a niche and get rich, right?
Most of our teams in Canada, but nailing a niche. And that's why it was the whole first section of the From Impossible to Inevitable book.
Yep.
But it's really about how do you focus on what you do best, what's most valuable to others, and avoid getting distracted by all the opportunities that are out there.
At the end of the year in December, I had a phone call with them to kind of assess how the year went. And the two worst things that could have happened to me happened on that phone call. The first thing was they said, hey, that book that we said we were going to write together? Well, we don't have time to do that because we're both got full-time jobs and we're working on our next book, and we can't go through with that. So that didn't work out. Even though I'd already written my half of the book. And they said, and also this training thing, it's going great. In fact, we want it to go full-time, right?
Okay.
But you can't do that if you've got a full-time job. So we've hired a training company that's going to take over and go big time.
No.
So literally in that one phone call, I got fired from my two, best ideas for launching my new career.
Your dream job to get into this dream industry, that dream venture shot.
All crashed in 20 minutes, right? So I spent about a month moping around about that. And then in January,
because you hit the failure and you gotta let that resonate and be like, damn, what do I do next, right?
So I moped around for a month, and then I said, they're nice guys, but I don't need them. I mean, I can do this on my own. So I started with my half of the book that I'd written, and I looked through it and I realized basically what I had written was a bunch of stories. And that's when it occurred to me, that's really the thing that I'm good at. I'm good at finding, crafting, and telling compelling stories. And so I said, I'll just write a whole book about that one topic.
Wow.
Not all the other stuff that we were going to write a book about together, but just that one. So I did. I spent the next 2.5 years working on a book about storytelling. It became Lead with a Story, but I still had my full-time job because I wasn't brave enough to just quit and see if it would work, because most books are a phenomenal failure, and hopefully yours won't be, but it's not a high success rate business, right? So I waited until it got published, and then I kind of waited to see what would happen. And I think I picked a good topic. I think the book's decent, and it did better than I expected. I think it's in its 11th or 12th printing now, and it's in 7 or 8 languages around the world. And so I pretty quickly started getting phone calls to go do the kind of thing that I wanted to go do. And that's what gave me the courage to finally, quit my full-time job and do this for a living. And about that time, I got my second book contract, and then the third one. And so
holy cow,
started working out right.
Amazing.
Again, why I quit. So
you were going back to school, and then what happened? They finally let you in, right? And you were able to
finally graduated at Cal Poly after, I think I tell people now it took me 9 years to graduate at Cal Poly, and they think, oh, that's interesting, but they don't realize I have that.
That you played pro ball for 7 years.
Yeah, and so I knew that I was done with that, and so I wanted to basically find a part-time job doing something, and I was thinking, all right, well, what is this? Is this, working at a real estate office, or is this doing whatever? I don't know. And then I ran into a mutual friend that was a sales associate manager at MindBody. And sales associate manager is basically the SDR manager, but it was a part-time role for, mainly kids that were in college at the time, really just doing the low-level activities of the sales department with prospecting and so forth. And I said, well, I only have 5 months. Would you hire me for 5 months just to come in and blast cold calls? And he was like, absolutely, you're hired, please.
That's awesome.
And so basically after that year, I think I was in Rochester that year playing with the Twins. I signed a free agent deal with the Rockies the next year, so I knew I was leaving in March. So then I came back to San Luis Obispo, started at MindBody, was a part-time sales associate for about 5 months. And meanwhile, I was doing the same thing. I think I was working out in the morning there, doing my hitting, doing my running, doing my throwing. And then I would go to the office and just blast cold calls for 4 hours for the rest of the day. And it was interesting. And that's really where I started to find out that sales is exactly the same as baseball, because it's repetition, it's practice, and it's not being afraid of getting rejected and getting out or getting a no on the phone. And I ended up being a really successful sales associate part-time. And so then I knew when my career was over that I'd found a home.